America's favorite board game. All of the other folks who added their ideas along the way helped make it great too. So who wins in this story? What do you think? Did Lizzie Maggie make a wrong move? Did Charles Darrow? How would you have played it? In any case, there is no doubt that millions of people all over the world adore Monopoly. 30 Minutes Over Oregon, a Japanese pilot's World War II story.
Is this book actually 30 minutes?
No, it's just called 30 Minutes Over Oregon. That's its title. All right, so here's a prologue, and this is going to give you a little bit of idea for what happened before this story takes place. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, an American naval base on Hawaii. The surprise attack killed thousands of soldiers and brought America into World War II. To retaliate, the U.S. bombed Tokyo from the sky. This became known as the Doolittle Raid, which would later be memorialized in both a book and a film called 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. In response, Japan set out to prove that continental America, though far from all the World War II combat, could also be bombed. This is the story of what happened next. "15 miles off the Oregon coast, on September 9th, 1942, Nobuo Fujita strode across the slippery deck of a submarine. He gripped the 400-year-old samurai sword that had been in his family for generations. "Come on," he told the navigator. "It will soon be sunup." They climbed into a small plane that was about to be launched by a catapult towards the United States. As he did before every flight, Nobuo strapped the sword to his seat for good luck. Crew members loaded 168-pound bombs underneath each wing of the plane. The Japanese hoped that the bombs would start a fire that would consume the Oregon woods, and then rage into nearby towns and cities. "Do not tell anyone," Nobuo's commander had told him, "not even your wife." So instead of sharing with Aiko what Japan had entrusted him to do, Nobuo left strands of hair and fingernail clippings for her to bury if he didn't make it back. If the American military shot at him, his plane would not be fast enough to evade being hit. The catapult flung the plane off the sub with a hard whoosh. Shortly after 6 a.m., high above the thickly wooded mountains 9 miles east of Brookings, which is in Oregon, Nobuo gave his navigator the order: "The bombs are to be dropped here." Nobuo wheeled the plane. Over his shoulder, he caught sight of a white flash below. He beelined back to the ocean, flying low enough to clip the tops of the trees. So that means he was flying so low, trying to stay out of sight. His plane was almost hitting trees that were in the woods. He landed on the water, and the sub crew hoisted the plane aboard with a crane. They quickly removed the wings and floats and stowed everything in a watertight hangar. The sub then dove 250 feet underneath the water. Meanwhile, the forest was burning, a bit. Only one of the 2 bombs had actually exploded, sparking patches of fire that did not spread. The ground was too damp from recent rain. The other bomb had buried itself on impact without a trace. So even though he dropped the bombs, it didn't make a fire like they were supposed to. 4 men from Forest Lookout Station spotted the smoke and trudged several hours to the remote site and extinguished the flames. They figured the fire was caused by lightning, but they noticed a splintered tree and beneath it, a small pit in a circle of scorched earth. Widening the pit into a crater, they uncovered metal fragments. Some had markings in Japanese. The news that a foreign foe had flown in and out of American airspace undetected zipped through Brookings, Oregon. Townsfolk were shaken, but many were more concerned for their relatives fighting overseas. Several newspapers put forth the notion that the plane may have taken off from a sub, but this was dismissed as improbable, which we actually know now to be true, and they just didn't believe it. The military assumed that the incident was isolated and did little to increase their efforts to defend the Oregon coast. 20 days after the bombing, Naboyo did it again. Same plan, same plane. Only this time, for greater stealth, he went by at night. To protect coastal communities from becoming easy targets, the U.S. military routinely ordered blackouts during the war, but the lighthouse at Cape Blanco remained lit, and guided to shore by its beam, Naboyo headed to a wooded area north of Brookings and dropped 2 more bombs on Oregon. So blackouts, they used this, they made like all of the cities shut off all of the lights, so that way if like enemy planes were flying over, they wouldn't see that there was a bunch of civilians living there to bomb it. But the lighthouse stayed on during this because it was unsafe to have it off. On his return, Naboyo could not locate the sub. Nearly out of fuel, he resigned himself to dying with honor by winging back and crashing into the lighthouse. The mission comes first, the sub next, he said to his navigator. We come last. But a moment later, he glimpsed a dark, snaky shimmer on the ocean swells, an oil leak from his sub. So now we got a whole lot of problems here. The Japanese believed the second 2 bombs had detonated. Americans scoured the woods, but found no fragments and no damage. Or if they did, they kept quiet about it. Either way, Japan claimed both invasions as victories. They had caught America off guard. After years at war, Naboyo returned to Japan, anxious to rejoin Aiko and their son and daughter, Yoshi and Yoriko. As his ship pulled into port, into home, Naboyo gazed through binoculars to mask his tears. In 1945, Japan surrendered to the United States and its allies, ending World War II. Naboyo opened a hardware store and lived quietly in a Tokyo suburb. He never discussed his Oregon raids, though they were rarely out of his mind, and the residents of Brookings largely forgot about their close call until 1962. So, after World War II, he just kind of went